Okay, so what we're going to talk about in this session is some crossover stuff between AI and digital identity. So Rob asked me sort of what was interesting in fintech at the moment, and I said basically, well, AI and digital identity. So he said, well, can you come and talk about AI and digital identity then? So I thought, that sounds like a reasonable idea. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do it is because I'm so bored listening to the talks about artificial intelligence at banking conferences I go to at the moment, because they're very dreary. And they're about, you know, can the bank use AI? And they don't really mean AI, they mean machine learning, to do some like lending or mortgage recommendations. That's such a lack of vision about where AI is going to take us. I really appreciated the opportunity to put the record straight. So, we're going to talk about this question that was posed by Callum, who's the son of my very good friend Victoria Richardson down at Australian Payment Network. And he asked a much more interesting question than actually I asked this morning. In fact, anybody else asked this morning. And he said, will robots need passports? And I think, actually, well, it doesn't matter what I think. What do you think? Who thinks robots will need passports? Can you put your hand up if you're with me on this? Who thinks robots will need, and who is a dreary fuddy-duddy rooted in the past who doesn't understand the scope of technological innovation? Most of you. Okay, all right, so we know where we stand on this one then. So I'm going to persuade you by the end of this that robots will need passports, and I have an inexorable chain of unanswerable logic to prove that to you. So here's the problem space. The problem space is about 20 years ago, if you went to a conference like this, you would see some dreary management consultant like me talking with some clip art they got off the internet. And it was always, remember, it was that cartoon of the dog, which I think came from the New Yorker. And it was that cartoon of the dog with the keyboard. And it says, on the internet, no one knows you're a dog. Are you too young to remember any of this? You look quite young. Okay, if you listen to, but this really happened. So people would just take this lazy cartoon, on the internet, no one knows you're a dog, and they thought that was interesting. It was a different time. So basically, have we solved that problem, given that we've now had 20 years of advanced thinking about digital identity? And of course, the answer to this is no. And in fact, the problem's actually got worse, because any kind of measure you want to apply to this, data breaches, identity theft, fraud, any measure you apply to it is immensely worse than it was 20 years ago. It hasn't got better, it's got worse, despite all of our best efforts, or perhaps because of our best efforts. So I'll just illustrate a couple of examples here. So I thought I'd use the UK example to illustrate things at the moment, because in the UK, we have an even worse identity strategy than anybody else. So on the one hand, you've got people talking about digital passports, and then you've got the official government advice that you shouldn't be using your passport to prove your age and things like that. And then you have the minister telling us we're going to have to use our passports to help. By the way, I'm not making this up. You think I'm making this up? Just for the minute. If you want to log on to an adult site, you have to hold your passport up to the webcam so that they can check your. He really said that. I didn't make that up. Okay. So, which of course would lead to identity theft on an enormous scale. So plan B is to use credit cards, which we already know will lead to identity theft on an enormous scale. So the government's current strategy is to make identity theft worse. So why, I don't know, but I'm not a politician, I couldn't say. But I think it's very important not to listen to us about this kind of thing. We have to come up with a much better plan than this. Robots will need passports, but when I'm talking about passports, the kind that robots will need, I'm not talking about the kind of passports that we have now, right? The kind of passports that we have now are sort of useless. We actually need much better passports than the passports we have now, and then we can let the robots have them. So what do we do with the passports we have now? Well, here's a good example. This is one of my, I have a favorite identity fraud every week. I mean, every week somebody comes along with a better fraud than the week before. So it's very easy. So this week, my favorite fraud is this. This is your favorite fraud this week as well, right? Of course, because it's a great one. So this is an ICO, because all the best frauds involve ICOs at the moment. All the cool kids are doing ICO fraud. I mean, there are some people who are still doing credit card fraud, but all the cool kids are doing ICO fraud. So there's a great ICO fraud this week. Benebit, did you hear about this? $3 million just. So basically, you create an ICO, people send you money. Well, that's it, basically. That's the fraud. So So they said, well, the guy's disappeared. Don't worry, because we checked his passport, and of course the passport turned out to be fake. And even better than this, the pictures of the team that were on the website were copied from a boys' school in the UK. So you don't even have to work. So not only has fraud got, we've actually made it easier for people. People don't even have to really work at this stuff. I mean, I quite admire people when they put the legwork in and do a really good fraud. But this is just too easy for them, isn't it? I mean, in cyberspace, no one still knows you're a dog. However, things have changed a little bit in 20 years because now we've got the Internet of Things. So it used to be that on the Internet no one knew you were a dog, but now on the Internet no one knows that you're a fridge pretending to be a dog. So that's a sort of progress, isn't it, in a way? Because now you can hack fridges as well as PCs. And we call this progress, and I'm uncertain as to the direction of this, but we haven't solved the problem for people, and now we haven't solved the problem for things either. And actually, this is slightly worrying, you see, because if people break into your bank account and hack them, like if you steal my credit card and go around spending money, I don't really care, right? It's not my money, it's the bank's money, and the bank will give it back to me. If you steal my credit card, whatever. In fact, sometimes it can be quite funny when people steal credit cards and do amusing things with them, right? Hacking into your credit card, who cares? But now we have people hacking into cars and aeroplanes and all sorts of things. And so these lead to much more interesting and exciting hacks. I accept that. And so it adds to the general gaiety of society that you can now crash cars instead of just stealing credit cards. That's fun. I have a feeling that we probably should have worked a little harder on the security side of things before we went around connecting everything up. But you understand this. Every day you read in the paper, well, here's somebody who's found out a way to connect your tumble dryer to the internet for no apparent reason. I mean, no reason I can, but just because you can do it. And the general theory behind this is that doors are easy and locks are hard. So as people spend their time making doors, connecting things together is easy. But disconnecting things is really difficult, and it's an entropic argument, because there's only one way of connecting everything together, but there are multiple ways of having partial disconnection. It's a complicated problem. So we didn't solve the problem for people, and now we've made it worse by not solving the problem for things. And now we've moved on a little bit, so now no one knows you're a Russian hacked fridge pretending to be a Swedish bot that's pretending to be a dog from Fox News. So you see, does this sound to you like the problem's getting fixed? Because it doesn't sound to me like the problem's getting fixed. In fact, it sounds to me like the problem is about to get catastrophic. And the reason why it's about to get catastrophic, not to put too fine a point on it, is because democracy was invented before social media. And so one or the other has to change. We either have to change democracy or we have to change social media. We can't have both of them in their current formulation. They're incompatible. And by the way, I'm not the only person that thought of this. In fact, I'm not even the first person to have thought of this, because Marshall McLuhan wrote about this in 1964 in Understanding Media. And he absolutely correctly said that in an electronic age, there will be new ways of being evil. This is half a century ago. People could see where this was going, and we've done nothing about it. It's like we can hardly complain we didn't see this coming. So now look at the situation that we're in. Now we have, and this is just from the last couple of days. There's a fantastic story in the New York Times over the weekend about all the celebrities and the politicians buying all the fake followers. I didn't even know you could buy fake followers on Twitter. I want millions of them. I don't care about real people. And they're not as interesting to me. So I'm very happy to have lots of fake followers. Other people more sensitive about this kind of thing, you know? But nevertheless, when you see somebody on Twitter, you have no idea whether they're real or not. And that didn't used to matter until we started wandering into fake news. By the way, I wrote a piece in 2004 which was about the 500,000 bot fake army that was being deployed at that point on social media. This is not a new problem either. It's just somehow we never really cared about it before. But now we've got to the point where you can't trust anything. There's a huge fraud going around in the UK at the moment. This is to do with instant payment fraud, because people get emails that purport to come from their lawyers saying, oh, well, the house purchase, because the criminals monitor the lawyers' email servers, and when they see an email that says, oh, you have to pay for your house purchase now, please send the money to this account, they just resend the email saying, oh, we made a mistake. Don't send the money to the NatWest Bank in London. You have to send it to the Dunkin' Donuts on Minsk railway station or something. And people do. People send the money to these because they don't know any different. It's criminally irresponsible to do business over email, but people still do it. But now it isn't fake instant payments and bit of Bitcoin looting and that sort of thing. Now it's the situation where the whole society is being subverted because absolutely nobody knows what's real or not. No one knows. There was a fantastic argument about this on Twitter over the weekend. Now, I spend quite a lot of my time arguing on Twitter. Other people, I mean, you don't, right? Because you have, what do you call it, jobs. You have jobs, that's why you don't. I have the time. But so there's a fantastic discussion going on over the weekend. Mark Cuban, the entrepreneur on Twitter, he said, we have to put a stop to this. Twitter has to confirm a real name and a real person by every account. Now, this is absolutely, completely the wrong solution, okay? The idea that real names will help any of these problems is completely wrong. In fact, real names make the problem even worse, because there are a great many situations that I can go into where using real names means that either transactions won't take place at all, or those transactions could result in real harm to people. You don't have to think these through very hard. Real names are not a solution to any of these problems. However, real people might be. So let's think of an example where we need to know if there are real people. And I thought, well, I can talk to you about esoteric political issues, but that's not going to get anybody thinking about this stuff. And it's also not a practical business case for any of the people who are here. So let's think of a real business case for this. And I want to give you an example of a real business case. And a real business case is internet dating. So internet dating is a mainstream activity, millions of people, but it's absolutely riven with fraud. There's colossal fraud because, of course, nobody knows who anybody is. Now, just imagine, well, you don't have to imagine it because OkCupid did it. So imagine you say, well, okay, we're going to solve the problem of fraud in internet dating by making everybody use their real names. Well, how many people would log on to internet dating if they had to give their real name and other real attributes in advance of any transactions they might want to? Like, let's say I'm on internet dating, right? I would obviously pick Megan. I wouldn't have to think twice about it. So I'm on internet dating. I see Megan. So I, send her some information about me, right? So, like, I'm a fighter pilot, and I earn $10 million a year, and, basic information that she would use to select. If I had to give my name to somebody that I don't know whether I want to engage, then the transaction will never take place. It's not just that it's just business won't happen if you have to disclose this information about yourself. But so we live in this odd, paradoxical transaction environment where I don't want to take part in transactions because I can't see any information about the counterparties. But on the other hand, if I have to give information about myself, I won't take part at all. You see what I mean? We want full disclosure from other people. I call it the Hillary Clinton paradox, because she very famously gave a speech a few years ago about internet security, and she said, I paraphrase, she said basically the internet should be a space for free exchange of information, and anybody should be able to connect, and we want to share and whatever, except for people we don't like. Essentially, I paraphrase. That's the paradox that actually you could help to resolve and make some decent business out of it at the same time. So how can we solve this problem? How can we get rid of the fakes without causing more problems by getting people to give up more and more personal information. And more to the point, what do banks have to do with this? Well, to understand a way forward in this, you have to have a model of digital identity which will make sense in resolving this paradox. So here's a very super simplified model of digital identity that I use all the time. So on the left-hand side, we have, this is called three-domain identity, 3DID, okay? So on the left-hand side, we have the identification domain, which is to do with binding digital identities to real people. Binding digital identities to real people is time-consuming, expensive, complicated, full of legal liability, and we want to minimize it as much as possible. Okay, put a little pin in that because we're going to come back to that when we talk about banks in a moment. In the middle, we have the authentication domain. How do you know that the person there is the... Well, that's a solved problem as far as I'm concerned. We have iPhones and face recognition and FIDO Alliance, so we're not going to worry about authentication. That's a solved problem. On the right-hand side, we have the authorization domain, which is where transactions take place. And this is where we want to shift business. So it doesn't matter whether it's internet dating or arguing with people on Twitter. All the transactions should be moved into the authorization domain because real identities should not be part of the transaction space. You've got GDPR coming just around the corner. So if you don't believe me, take a look at the first 15,000, 20,000 pages of GDPR, and then I'll invite you to reconsider. Because businesses in Europe alone are spending, according to the Financial Times, 8 billion euros this year on GDPR compliance. And if you get it wrong, you could be fined 4% of global turnover. So if you still want to have real people's, real information involved in the transaction space, you're insane. We want to move transactions into the authorization domain. It shouldn't be about who you are. Transactions should be about what you're allowed to do. It isn't, am I Dave Birch? It's, am I allowed into this website? When I go to buy something in a store, it's not, is this Dave Birch? It's, does he have credit? When I want to interact with you on internet dating, it shouldn't be, is this Dave Birch? It should be, is this person over 18? Are they resident in the United Kingdom? It's a quick. Megan's not allowed to answer this because she knows the answer. What do men lie about most on internet dating in the UK? I mean, I'm embarrassed I even know the answer to this, but I do for complicated reasons. What do men lie about most on the internet? Come on, have a guess. It's not a test. Guess. Income. That's what I thought. I thought it would be income, but that's because I have a very poor view of women, I guess. I don't know. I thought it would be income. It's not income. It's height. Yeah, it's height, right? So, okay. So if I connect with Megan on the internet data, what's the first thing that Megan wants to know about me when we connect on internet dating? You're supposed to say height at this point because you're interrupting the you see how I constructed this fantastic narrative flow and you just torpedoed it right below the waterline. You're supposed to say height because that's my opportunity to say no. The first thing that you want to know when you connect with someone on internet dating is that they're a person, that they actually even exist. When Ashley Madison got hacked, not even 1% of the women on the Ashley Madison website turned out to be real. They were all bots. Not even 1% were real. 99% were bots, which I prefer, but you know. Some men are more conservative. No, look, the first, you just want to know, is this a real person? And that's the same problem that Mark Cuban was talking about with Twitter. Just knowing that you're a real person solves a huge swathe of these problems. So the question is, what would we have to put into the virtual identity to prove that you're a person? Or to phrase the question in another way, who knows whether you're a person or not? Well, the answer is, of course, the bank. Oh, I thought there was going to be a big cheer then. I was gearing myself up to... Because this is when you say, hooray, I can see there actually is a future for retail banking, even in an environment where open APIs have destroyed the profitability of fee-based business and where the transactions involving payments have been reduced to a utility status that it's impossible to earn a living from except at an enormous scale. And as Wired magazine said at the end of last year, it's entirely possible that one of the banks in the UK will go under because of this. So that's why you're supposed to say, hooray, now I can see something that banks could actually do usefully in the future. Okay, I need to rethink that part of the presentation. But thank you for the feedback, because I really do take it all very seriously. So here's a virtual identity, right? So a virtual identity is just an identifier, some attributes. Those attributes are turned into credentials by a third party. And by the way, it doesn't matter whether you store this on a blockchain, database, you can carry it around tattooed. It doesn't matter. Put all that to one side for a moment. When I go and log into the internet dating site, I need to be able to give them a virtual identity which contains attributes that are relevant to that transaction. In fact, the ideal, because we want to have lots of virtual identities, because each virtual identity embodies a relationship, the ideal would be to have virtual identities which, when you engage in a transaction, you put forward a virtual identity which only contains the attributes that are necessary for that transaction to complete. So the canonical example if everybody uses is if I go into a bar, I need to show them an identity which only contains one attribute, which is that I'm over 18 or 21 or whatever it is in Hong Kong. We want that partitioning, okay? So how does this put banks in the loop? Well, here's the example. I go to the dating site. In order to access the dating site, I need some sort of dating passport. I don't have one, so I go to the dating passport site. The dating passport site bounces me to my bank. I log into the bank with two-factor authentication, which the bank has had to, so in Europe that's mandatory, so the bank's already got the two-factor authentication. The bank already has the tokenization infrastructure as well. So the bank returns the unique cryptographic token, the relevant attributes, and the digital signature. The dating passport is an M-bun, a meaningless but unique number. In other words, you can't deduce any personally identifiable information from the number itself. Okay? So to the dating site, I am just a number, but now they know that I'm over 18. And by the way, what work did the bank have to do this? The bank's already done the KYC. The bank already knows who I am. The bank already knows who I'm over 18. The bank's already done all that work as a cost. This is an opportunity to turn some of that into revenue. So now, when I log into the dating website does not know I'm Dave Birch. It just knows that I'm 12345 at Barclays. And if the dating website gets hacked, all the hackers get is the tokens, which are meaningless. And if Barclays gets hacked, they have a lot more to worry about than the fact that I was on Ashley Madison, believe me. So we don't need to worry about that. So to answer the question, will robots have passports? Well, yes, they will. Because to get anything done online will be in the authorization domain. And in order to be in that authorization domain, you'll have to have a collection of virtual identities. And that collection of virtual identities is built on the passport. Now, you'll want to have a different passport for different parts of your life, because anybody who was paying attention in the middle of that presentation will immediately have realized that all of the virtual identities that are built from any individual digital identity will share the same public key. So unless you use derived keys or you partition the keys across different identities, my preferred way of doing it, you could be tracked across those different identities. You don't want that. But you could imagine you have a hobby identity, just like you have 4 or 5 credit cards in your wallet, you'll have 4 or 5 identities, 4 or 5 digital passports. And when you go to log into the bank, it will ask for a finance passport. And when you go to log into the internet dating site, it will ask you for a passport. You can give your finance passport if you want, but you'll probably want to create a new dating passport. So logically, it all hangs together. So what's different about this? Well, what's different is that robots won't have this one crucial attribute. Because the bank knows that you're a person. So when you get your financial passport, or whatever you base on it, you'll have the is a person attribute. And this is the solution to the problem that people like Mark Cuban were outlining. In Twitter, just to pick the obvious example, you should be able to say, I don't want followers who don't have the is a person attribute. I don't want followers who are bots. I don't want to follow a bot, or at least if I follow a bot, I want to know it's a bot. You should be able to say, I don't want to see news that originates from bots, for example. Or I don't want to see stuff that's been retweeted by bots. The solution is not to try and police the infrastructure, but to give people the tools to police that infrastructure. So on the internet dating site, you should be able to say, I don't want to interact with people that are bots, or in my case, I do want to interact with people that are bots. Why would I want to do that? Well, because, you see, in the quite near future, when you're talking about artificial intelligence and financial services, what you're thinking about is, oh, the bank can use artificial intelligence to run a chatbot or something like that. That's literally the least interesting thing you could think about. In the future, the customers will have bots as well. So how does the bank know whether it's dealing with a person or not? I went to a meeting with my pension advisor a couple of weeks ago. I mean, the guy may as well have been speaking ancient Greek. I had literally no idea what he was talking about. Pensions are so complicated. I really don't want to do it. I really want the bot to do it for me. And at the moment, your bank sells investment instruments to me with like stupid adverts on television or things in the newspaper or something like that. But what you need to think about is in the future, how is your bot going to sell things to my bot, right? Because I'll go and download my bot from somewhere that's going to look after my interests, not your interests. So you all started this presentation thinking about stupid stuff to do with robots, passports, what's he going to talk about? But my answer is, these passports are the crucial glue that we need to make the future financial services infrastructure. If you can't even tell whether someone connecting to you is a person or not, how can you do any kind of business online? And we're this close to the AIs being indistinguishable from people online. So when you make people do like the Equifax Jeopardy, I'll take places I used to live for 500. Did I live at number 13 or was it number 17? I can't remember. AIs will take care of all of that problem. We're this close to them being indistinguishable. You know how you have to do that? Sometimes when you log into places, it says, prove you're not a robot by clicking on the things that are cars. You know, they do that sort of thing. I get confused doing that right now. I want robots to do that for me now. How far, you know, in a couple of months' time, robots will be able to do all that. I worry about it being the other way around. What happens when the robots are running everything and they start discriminating against people? And then I'll go to the website and it'll say, you have to prove you're a robot. What's the 14 million and second digit of pi? You have 4 seconds. But oh, shit. And then it knows I'm a person, and then it gives me a really bad deal because it knows that people are worse drivers than cars are. You're not think. So, look, if you think this is about chatbots, you couldn't be more wrong. And if you think identity is only about people, you don't have a prayer in the new financial services environment. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Dave.